Well, hello! Welcome to StashBlaster Quilts. I'm Maria Spatelnik, and I am here to help you make your quilts a little faster and a little simpler for any skill level you may have, from the very, very beginning student all the way up to the experienced sewer who just wants to be a little bit more efficient. If you haven't watched my videos before, what you need to know is that I'm a professional organizer by trade. What does that mean? It means I spend all my time helping people get their items organized in their home or their office or their sewing room so that they can accomplish what they want to accomplish. Now, for some, that's getting a ton of work done in a very short period of time. For some, it's just having it set up in such a way that if they want to do handwork, let's say, that everything they need is in reach, and so they don't have to keep getting up and down, they can just relax. So whatever kind of sewer you are, that's what we're here for today. These always start with an organizational type of tip at the beginning, and then it's a relaxed, I'll tell you what's going on in my world. If you want to put up a quote or a question or a comment or something like that, I encourage you to do so. I really want this to be a place where people can just come and relax. If nothing shows up there for us to talk about, or nobody has emailed me at StashBlasterQuilts.com, then I just tell you what's going on with me. So it's it can get a little boring, I suppose, but that's okay. We also do a bunch of sewing, and so you'll get to see how that goes. But today we're going to talk about something that applies not just to sewing, but to every aspect of getting your time under control. Now, we all have the same amount of time in a day, regardless if we're filthy rich or scrapingly poor. And we all have only that limited amount. So how do you get your projects done? How do you get moved forward without just wasting that time? And also looking at this pile of projects that you mean to get to, but it seems like it's going to take so much of your time that you don't get started. So you constantly have this time pressure on you. That's one of the things that's the hardest for people to do, is to figure out what is worth your time and how to spend your time appropriately. The way I often explain it to clients is everything on this, at least in this country and pretty much in this world, comes down to money or time. If there's a task that needs to get done, either you spend the time learning how to do it, practicing it, and learning to do it properly, or you pay somebody else to do it. But it's going to cost you either your time or your money. So when it comes to being efficient with your time, most of us get overwhelmed by it. And we just build this dread up in our minds as to how long it's going to take to accomplish the task we want to accomplish. So one of the things that my guild did a few years ago was a JOT challenge. J-O-T. I think I did that. I have to do things backwards for it to work for you, so hopefully I did that right. Just one thing. What does that mean? If you're sitting down to sew, just do one thing. Get started. The hardest thing to do is just to start. And so I'll set a timer. I usually do things in 15-minute increments. And so I will do 15 minutes. And if I'm at a good stopping point and I have other things I have to do, then I stop. If I hit my stride, and I can, then I'll stay and I'll keep going. But getting started is the hardest thing. So you can do something called habit stacking. And so you take a habit you want to create, spending that 15 minutes a day sewing, or reading professional literature, or painting, or doing yoga, whatever it is for you. You take that 15 minutes and you try to attach it to a habit you already have. So let's say, for example, you get up in the morning, you get dressed, you go downstairs, you put out the dog. While the dog is outside, you start brewing coffee. When he comes in, you drink your coffee. and then you read the paper or you do something else. That is a routine that you've established. And if you can instead substitute in your desired habit onto an existing habit, you'll be much more likely to remember it, number one, and follow through with it, number two. So let's say what you say is, okay, I'm only going to spend 5 minutes first thing in the morning organizing in my kitchen. Okay? That's going through a drawer and saying, oh, I don't need these 3 things. And that may be all you do in 5 minutes, and who cares? Okay, it's going to take 5 minutes for your coffee to perk. 5 minutes you're going to spend. Instead of just leaning against the counter and thinking about butterflies, you're going to spend that 5 minutes doing something else. Productive, towards your goals. If you make that your habit, pretty soon the kitchen's done. You don't have anything else in the kitchen, so maybe you take that 5 minutes and you go into the living room. At some point, you're going to be surprised how quickly, actually. If you spend 15 minutes a day, whether it's 5, 5, and 5, or 15 at a time, doing these little habits, pretty soon that 5 minutes might just be a quick tidy. I'm going to walk around the house with a trash bag and pick up anything I see that looks like trash. Or I'm going to take a bag and I'm going to pick out anything I know can go for donation. And maybe that's all you do. But maintenance is the hardest part of any type of task like organizing. Because it can be really fun actually to get in there and make everything all nice and neat and pretty and all lined up and ooh, everybody says ooh and ah. But they don't notice that things are dusted unless you don't. They don't notice that things are neat unless they're not. So the maintenance part can be one of the hardest to maintain simply because it's completely thankless. So if you can get it down to a point where while your coffee's perking, you collect the trash, because trash goes out today and I'll take the trash bag out with me when I go to to my car to go to work or to go run other errands or do whatever else I need to do today. If you've built that in, then it's much easier to do it. And it's just another habit, like brushing your teeth before going to bed. So when you're trying to work on a project, just do one thing. Maybe it's threading the machine. Simple. These things that you're doing can be the silliest, smallest, eensy-weensiest little things that you can imagine. I'm going to go into my sewing room. I'm going to take the cover off my machine and I'm going to turn it on. Then I'll turn it off, cover it, and walk it back out. Is that silly? Yes. But it got me in my sewing machine room. It got me touching my machine. What are the odds you're only going to turn it on and turn it back off? You're going to want to do something with it. So if you are prepared to have things like, like this. This is my leader and ender box. This just sits over on this side. And so when I was downstairs, I would pin things together just like this. You can see it. These are all ready to go. So all I need to do is turn on my machine, make sure it's threaded, and put one piece through. I've done one thing. Can I stop here? Sure. Do I want to? Probably not. Do I have an extra 2 minutes before the kids are coming home from school? Sure, I can put a couple more pieces through. The starting is always the hardest. So schedule time, 5 minutes, 15 minutes, where I'm going to go in and I'm going to do something. Now, if you're the type who isn't really prepared to do a small thing along the way, keep in mind that every giant project is a series of tasks. Now, the way I look at it is there's this project, and then each of the tasks should be able to be accomplished in a given period of time, usually under 5 minutes. Okay? Now, does that make my task list really long? Yeah, I may have 500 tasks in order to complete my project. I'm going to sew the sashing onto strip 1. Next task, sew the sashing onto strip 2. Strip 3, strip 4, the top sash, the bottom border, the side borders, whatever it is. It can be a very small thing. It could be, if you're doing something like washing dishes, I am going to put hot soapy water in the sink. Okay. If nothing else, it's going to help make the stuff that's on the dishes, excuse me, easier to get off when you can actually wash them later. Normally, if I've got 5 minutes, the hot soapy water is the start, and I still have a few minutes to get a few glasses into the dishwasher, whatever it is. But get started. Put it on your schedule, and if you want to have a whole list made out for all the tasks, for all your projects, you can do that. And I have, on occasion, had a life that has been so crazy that if I didn't break it down into tasks, I never would have moved. I would have just sat there, my wheels would have spun, and I did this. I actually lost time. An hour would have gone by and I didn't even know it because I had no idea what was happening. So by having these short little tasks ready to go, if I have 5 minutes, I know there's something I can do to move my projects forward. And just that little step adds up. I showed my Summer Breeze quilt on one of these lives. And it had pieces that started out 1 by 1.5 inch raw, and they're pinwheels. Not the half square triangle kind, the rectangle kind. The original name of that pattern is hopscotch, if you want to look it up. And so I had a design board behind me before I had these lovely walls, and I would just take 2 at a time. And if I didn't have a big project that I wanted to work on, I could just sew those little 2 patches together until I got a whole row done. And then I did the next row of 2 patches, and the next row of 2 patches. And since they were all strung together, I would take them downstairs and press them. I did that on another little break that I would have in between other activities. And then bring them up, and maybe a 5-minute task was to put them back in order across so that they were ready to be sewn into the 4 patches next. So I worked it step by step by step. And it took me over a year, but I wound up with a little 24 by 24, which was mostly leaders and unders. That's why it took me a year. But I've got this little quilt, Summer Breeze, that came out really well that I never would have had the time to work on if I'd looked at it as one big thing I had to sit down and do. Because all those tiny little pieces, putting them through, it takes forever before you actually see all the progress you've really made. Because by the time you've sewn all of those little 2 patches together, you've done about half the sewing of the middle part of your quilt. But they're tiny. It's now a 1.5 inch raw square. And it doesn't feel like much when it's this square. And then you take it and you sew it to another one. Now I've got a 3 by 1.5. And then I sew those to another one. Now I have a 3 inch. Well, 1.5 would be 1.25 is 2.5. Sorry, not 3. I just had to double check my math. It's been a very long week and a very long day. So it'd be a 2.5 inch by 1.5. It's still a tiny little thing. It's multiple pieces now, but it's still a tiny little thing. But when you start sewing those 2.5 inch strips to another 2.5, it starts to get to the point where, okay, now it's only a 2.5 inch block, but I'm starting to see real progress. But now I'm sewing 2.5s to 2.5s. And then I'm sewing, 4s, 4 3/4 to 4 3/4. You know what I mean? So you can start to put them, and they start coming together into bigger and bigger blocks, which are faster and faster to sew. So you start to feel like you're accomplishing something, but all those little teeny tiny ones can really feel like you've done nothing. But you got half the sewing done. It just doesn't feel like it because it's so small. So I really encourage you to just do a little bit at a time. And have a couple of projects that you can start and work on at any given time, where I'm just going to sew one of my English paper piecing pairs together. That's all I've got time for before I have to be out the door. But you sit down and you get it out and you stitch those together and you tie it off and you're like, okay, I made some progress. Teeny weeny, but I made some progress, so that you're ready the next time to sit down and put in another one and put in another one and put in another one. And fairly soon you're going to say, hey, I didn't spend any time at all on this. And look at how much I've gotten done. Because I did it 1 minute here and 3 minutes there and 5 minutes there. So remember, our tip for today is just get started. Just one thing. Whatever it takes for you to just begin. What'll often happen is I will sit to myself and I'll go, okay, I have got to get into the sewing room. I have this live stream in 2 days and I've been so busy I haven't been able to do any sewing. And so I'm like, okay, I can get one thing done today. And I go in and I start to do the one thing, and I'm watching my clock because I have one right off to the side here, so I can see it from here at my sewing station. So I can keep an eye on the clock. I also will set alarms on my phone, whatever it takes. And I will go ahead and I'll sew until I can't. I have to go. But I've got that moving. So a couple of days ago, I still had the strips of white and blue with no red. And now I was pinning, just before we get on, the sides. I got it all sewn together. Oops, I got the wrong way facing you. I'm sorry. So I got all the sashing done in the middle and the top and bottom, because this is the top and the bottom. And now all I have to do is put on the sides, and this top is done. So just one thing, a little bit every day, habit stacking. So that's it. It's a long one of these, I'm sorry, but it's super important, and it works for everything. If you're writing a book, if you're just trying to organize your home, if you are trying to build a quilt up, if you're trying to learn a new skill, spending 5 minutes, 15 minutes, whatever time you've given yourself every day at your machine to practice free motion quilting, you will be amazed at how quickly you will be a good free motion quilter. It just takes the time. And it can be in little increments. It's just practicing. It's just practicing. It's just practicing. I have a friend who's a free motion quilter, and she carries a notebook with her. And when she goes to pick up her kids at school, there's this long car line. So she sits on the line and she just keeps doodling her free motion quilting things. So that when she sits in front of her machine, it's just very methodical. She knows what she's doing. She has the motion down, and she can just fly with it. Especially when she's trying out something new. Maybe she wants to combine 2 or 3 or 4 different patterns. She can work it out on paper while she's waiting in line. I've been known to set up a little thing in my front seat where I would put like letters I had to send, and I would write those during those little 5 minutes or 15 minutes or half an hour, depending, that I was sitting online. So that was a habit that I built in to save myself from having to do that when my family was around and we were doing more family type things. So I hope that that was helpful. So we are now going to go ahead and move on to the quilting. I was asked an interesting question, in case you're curious, of do I watch other people's YouTube videos? Yes. Do I watch a lot of them? No. And one of the reasons for that is I just don't have the time. I'm either driving to clients or I'm with clients most of the time. But there are a couple of them that I do watch. And one is new to me. So I'm going to look it up here on my phone, so please forgive me. It's Tiny Orchard Quilts. I started watching some of her stuff, and she has a 4-video series on beginning free motion quilting. And I don't do a lot of quilting. I've done a lot of my quilting either stitch in the ditch, parallel lines next to the ditch, or I've often done things like a meander or a water or something like that. And so I don't do a lot of that stuff. I've also done a lot of quilting by check. Don't tell anybody. But I have done a lot of quilting by check. I would love to have a long arm machine, and I would love to, be able to do all that. But realistically, I know me, and unless and until the day comes that I can retire and dedicate the time to learning the machine, it would be a waste for me to have one now. And so my husband also made me promise if I ever did get one, I would not do the typical thing that a lot of us do, which is, okay, I'm going to get the long arm, and then I'm going to quilt for other people in order to pay for what, to pay back what I spent from the family money to have the long arm. And he told me that if I ever got one, it was because I needed to use it for me, and he didn't want me having the stress of having to do quilts for other people, because that would mean less time that I would be quilting for me. And I have to say, I can agree with him on that one. Okay, I got to give the guy a few little things along the way. But realistically, yes, if I could see myself, being all stressed out about it was the holidays coming and I have 12 quilts that I have to get quilted because these people are counting on them as gifts and I'm not getting there, and what am I going to do? And yeah, that's me. That's me. So if I ever do get one, I am planning that it's going to be something that's just going to be something I do for me and for you, if I'm still doing the YouTube thing at that point, which I'm hoping to do, that we will be doing together at that point. So, I know myself well enough to know that. And so I don't have a long arm, but I do a lot of them by check. But I was watching Tiny Orchard Quilts, and she has some wonderful ideas. And so what I think I'm going to start doing, and I've tried a few things, like loops and things like that, on my StashBlaster Quilts. That's what I use them for, is to practice those skills that I want to do when it comes to quilting. That's where I started learning better how to use a hopping foot. Not a hopping foot, an even feed foot for quilting as opposed to just the hopping foot. And I started to learn to do some of the circles, and I learned meander and all that, all on this kind of a quilt where if you mess it up, it doesn't matter. If it's not perfect, no one will care. They're thrilled that you thought about them and you made a quilt for somebody that didn't have one. If somebody's cold, they don't care that you crossed over a line during your meander. But that gives you all that time to practice. So I don't know why, but the regular meander I don't do very well, but I do water like a champ. I love to do water. And I took my water technique and did a flame technique that I developed on paper and pencil, like I was talking about earlier. So I did that on my star quilt that I did. And so I can show that to you. If you're interested, just drop me a note, and I'll show that on a later show. But in that case, I used a variegated thread in reds and oranges and yellows. And that's not a StashBlaster quilt. That's a more, it's a more regular type pattern. But it was really a lot of fun to develop how to do that in my star shape, because I had a big yellow center star, and then I had different kinds of stars all the way around it. And so my center star, I did this whole flame quilting thing. But I practiced on a StashBlaster quilt before I did it on that one to make sure that it would work. So that's another reason why I love to do these, is simply because once it's done, you're good. And if you made mistakes, it doesn't matter, but you're getting in that practice. So 5 minutes of quilting, 15 minutes of quilting every day, it's amazing how fast you'll be able to do stuff. And it works that way for everything. So, all right, so like I said, at this point I am going to be sewing the side sashes. Nope, here we go. Side sashes onto the red, white, and blue quilt. Let me see. Can you see it? This one. And so that's what I'm going to do. And then this is going to be done today. All I'll have to do is press it, and we'll be good. So I'm not putting on the up-close camera because, as usual, we're having technical issues. When I got in here the other day, I noticed that my monitor wasn't working. Now, those of you who have been around know that when it comes to me and these shows, Tech and I have a hate-hate relationship. So the machine knows. The machines all know that there's something I need to do, and so they're determined to make this a challenge for me. So I am, unfortunately, I had to deal with that, and so Scott came up. Scott's my husband, for those of you who are new. Scott came up and fixed the problem with his magic techno touch, and got everything working just in time for tonight's show. So that worked out well. But I didn't get a chance to make sure that all the cameras were all set up, because we put stuff here in my sewing room when my son's girlfriend came and stayed with us for a week. So that made a difference in terms of what I was able to do. So it is what it is. But it was a very pleasant week, and so I did some hand sewing downstairs, and we got this all going, and I'm hoping that both she and my stepmom will be able to come for Thanksgiving, because I have that big conference we've talked about in San Diego, which I've never been to, so I'm looking forward to going out there. And so that'll be kind of fun. I'm hoping to take my husband Scott with me, and that we might actually turn that into a little vacation. So I may wind up doing this show from San Diego or some part of California. And so, who knows? We'll see what happens. But yes, at this point, yeah, I'm just sewing this long seam. It's easy peasy, lemon squeezy. By the way, if you enjoy these organizational tips or my really weird banter or whatever, please hit subscribe, and likes are wonderful things. If you do subscribe and you hit the bell, YouTube will let you know when I'm going to be doing my next video. Now, I told you things have been crazy here with the organizing stuff. So I am way behind on taking the organizational section and turning it into an actual video and posting it. That's why I've been leaving the lives up, so people can go back and see them. My goal is to get caught up on all of those, finish the StashBlaster 1 video. I have 4 StashBlaster quilts. I just have to get the videos all completed, and on 1 I'm so close, but after 12, 14, 16-hour day, I just don't have filming in me. I don't speak English anymore. I speak blah 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 blah. So to save everybody, and myself too, I haven't been doing that filming, but my goal is to get back to that and to get these put out there. But this live is every Monday and Wednesday, 7 o'clock Eastern. Not every Wednesday, I'm sorry, Monday. What am I saying? It is, scratch and redo. These are the first and third Wednesday of every month. Now, if you go to the StashBlaster.com website, it also says it up there that it's the first and third Wednesday of the month here on YouTube. You can also email me there at mail@StashBlasterQuilts.com, and I've often taken emails that I've gotten and turned them into the organizational tip, either at the beginning, or sometimes I slide some stuff in later in the live while we're chatting. So I answer a lot of questions that way. If you send me a question and I'm going to answer it not at the beginning but later on in the show, I will reply back to you and let you know that yes, I'm going to cover it on the upcoming show, but it won't be at the very beginning. It'll be later in the live. Every time I do the live, even when I'm caught up on the editing, I don't take it down until I post the next one. So you'd still have the full 2 weeks, sometimes 3, depending on how many Wednesdays in the month there are. You'd have 2 to 3 weeks to go and watch the whole thing and find your answers. And it will be at the beginning of the not organizational section, if that makes sense. So first I would do the organizational tip, and then the very next thing I would do is answering anything that came in on email or in chat or things like that. If something comes up in a chat and I don't see it, then I will answer it on the next live. So that's what I want to do. Is I want to be extremely responsive, and I want to make sure that you get out of this what you want to get out of this. So anyway, that's that. So please hit subscribe, hit the bell. If you liked it, like it. I am hoping at some point that when I am able to do this more, that this will become my main thing. So, but that only happens if people like me. I feel kind of like Katniss in the Hunger Games. The way to get sponsors and things like that, which I don't really know what I'm going to do about that. But in order to succeed, you need to get people to like you. And just like Katniss, I don't know how to do that. So I'm hoping that you're having a good time. Alright, so anyway, when it comes to California, I've been there once. I was 7 months pregnant with my, well, almost 26-year-old son. He'll be 26 in March. And he is coming to the grim realization that that's when all the good things like being on our insurance and that kind of stuff ends. But I was pregnant with him at the time. We went to San Francisco. I was driving the car. I could see the hotel. I knew I was like 2 blocks away. As I'm driving the car and it's dark. It's like 10 o'clock at night. Their time, and we're from the east, so we're like dying. We're just like so ready to go to bed. And so I'm driving and trying to figure out what's going on. And Scott has his map, and the one-way streets weren't marked, and it was a crazy thing. And so we got in that night. The next day he had an interview because he was job hunting, and they flew both of us out so that we could get an idea what it was like. I slept most of the day. I put on a football game so I could tell him what happened with his favorite team. I missed the entire game, which was kind of sad because I had to tell him what the score was when he came in based on the little ticker at the bottom of the screen. And then we left that night. So I spent less than 24 hours in San Francisco, and that was my entire experience of California. So assuming that Scott doesn't get picked for the grand jury, because he has a summons now for a grand jury. If he doesn't get picked, then we're going to attempt to do a couple of weeks out in California. We'll probably do Disney because I'm just that kind of a girl. I love Disney. And of course, I've never been to Anaheim. I've only been to Orlando. So we'll probably do that, but I'm sure we'll do a bunch of other stuff too. So I'll have lots of things to talk about when I come back. We are also looking for quilt shops out there who might be interested in having me teach my sewing room organization class. It's an incredibly popular class here, and in-person classes are always a lot more fun. Now, I do have to say that given COVID and everything else, I don't know if California is going to still be fully open. I mean, we don't know about anything. Not even sure if the conference that I'm supposed to speak at is still going to be live at that point. It's supposed to be. We're planning for it to be live. I already have my tickets. But, you know, the way this goes, with it being fall, who knows what's going to happen. But I am really hoping that I can set something up where I can meet some people, some of my quilting brothers and sisters out in California, and get to know all of you folks better too. So anyway, that's the idea. Okay. So another thing, I don't know if you can see it here. Can you see my Band-Aids here? I got my flu vaccine and my second shingles shot today. So I gotta tell you, the first shingles shot, yeah, I was a little stiff, not a big deal. Add the flu shot in today, I am feeling it now. So hoisting even though it's just a top, hoisting it up and running it around, my right arm's fine, but oh, my left is hurting a little bit. So I'm really glad that I only have these 2 border pieces to put on today. And then this will be done, and I can start planning out the backing, choosing the backing, piecing it if I need to, and getting ready to make my quilt sandwich and do the quilting. So a lot of my quilts, tops like this that I do, I actually don't quilt if I use them for classes. I was attending a class and the instructor said that another instructor she had seen, so I'm not sure where this all started, was mentioning that she didn't quilt her quilts because the tops are much easier to transport. They're much lighter. And I'm not sure how true that is, but in terms of, is that why they didn't quilt their quilts? But I will say it's a wonderful excuse, and so I have appropriated it for myself. Because carrying quilts for a trunk show, when they're fully done and fully quilted, they get heavy. And especially if you do a lot of intricate quilting and things. So I usually take like 2, 3, 4, depending, quilts that are done. And especially if I'm driving my car versus if I'm in a plane. And I'll have some that are fully done, and then I just carry the tops for like class samples and stuff, just because it is a bit crazy to try to deal with 100 pounds of quilts along with everything else you've got to take with you on a trip. I was also at a lecture where they mentioned that in the airplane, I guess somebody had fish, like crates of fish in the cargo part of the plane that leaked all over her suitcase and onto her quilts. So whenever I travel by plane or train or someplace where they have my suitcase, what I'm doing now is I'm wrapping I'm putting a double layer of the great big clear lawn and leaf bags in the bottom of my suitcase, and then I lay in my quilts, and then I take the first one and I fold it and then tape the edge down, and then I fold the other one the other way. Well, actually I flip the whole stack and then I put it on the other way so that I don't have both openings on the same side, and then I will flip and fold and then tape that edge down really, really well, just in case something horrible happens. It's somebody else got bitten, but now I'm shy. But that's just one of those things where I want to be sure that I'm covered. Oh, see, now I moved my leaders and enders box, and so when I just went to go grab one, I couldn't find it. Okay, so I've moved my box in front of me now, and I'm just going to grab a couple. And I'm putting them over here on the side just so that I don't have to do this whole reach around thing. Because I don't mind doing this if it's just me, but I don't want to make people seasick as I go back and forth. Alright, so I reached the end of the first side. I'm going to go ahead and pop a leader and ender in here. And this is a simple 4-patch. And it's kind of funny because I don't really have a plan for what I'm going to do with these 4 patches. I was doing a project, it's one of the other StashBlasters actually, where my guild was doing a big project, and so we were given a ton of fabric by a local quilt shop to do these charity quilts. And they had a lot of people turned in all their scraps at the same time, and so once they were done assembling the final quilts, they still had scraps left. Well, some of them were pre-sewn, and they were all 2.5-inch strips. So I said, okay. And so I made StashBlaster 4, and then I still had some of these 2.5-inch pairs or more together. So now I'm turning them all into 4 patches that match. What do I mean by match? Sometimes my 4 patches, I will just have 2 lights, here we go, 2 lights and 2 darks, and they may not be the same fabrics. In this case, I did pair them up so that I'll have a 4 patch that will be the same fabrics in the alternate corners. Obviously I haven't sewn this one yet. And then what I'll do is I'll assemble them all into a design based on the lights and darks in these 4 patches, but I will have them all kind of going in a combination. So that's the thought. But I often will sew half square triangles and 4 patches just out of leftover stuff that I have. I also make chip blocks where I take the pieces that are too small to go into my wall of fabric squares and stuff and scrap stuff. And I'll sew those all together. and I'll make a block, usually something like a flying goose block, where you have the big block that's going to be the, if you use the 5 square method of making flying geese, the big block becomes your center triangle. So if I make a chip block that big, then I get 4 flying geese with homemade fabric pretty much in the middle. And they're all different because they're all from different chips and different places in my block. So that one's kind of fun. I like to occasionally just pop in one of those just because it's different. And the nice thing about flying geese, half square triangles, quarter square triangles, 4 patches, and a couple of other designs, is that you can trim them down. So if I have in my bin of flying geese a goose that's 3.5 by 6.5 and would finish at 3 by 6, and I needed to finish at 2.5 by 5, I can trim it down very easily to the size that I need, and it's already pre-made. And I do that when I do those kinds of blocks when I just need to sew, but I don't either have the mental capacity, and I know that I don't, to work on something that's going to be finicky and need a lot of my attention. Let's say I can't sleep, it's 3 o'clock in the morning. That's not a time to work on something where you have to match up patterns and points and everything be perfect, because you're going to be tearing it out the next day. So that's when I can do something like, I'll grab my leaders and enders box and just sew squares together. Why? Because I always have a ton of those. And I make them and I pin them by the ton. So it just doesn't matter if I run through a whole bunch of them now. I'll get to them sooner or later. And then they go into my box. And then when I'm ready, all I have to do is trim them up. And I now have a 4 patch already sewn. And it can just get popped into my design. And that just makes life so much easier. And the finished quilts come out a lot quicker that way. So just as a thought. Okay, so I have one of these sewn on, but not the other. I am sewing the sashing, the borders, and I did the same thing with the sashing, with the solid piece of fabric down. Okay, so in this case, this is my border. I'm going to have this on the bottom, and I'm going to have my piece here with all of my seams on the top. And then that way I can make sure that it's feeding properly, but also that I don't get any humps from a seam getting dragged over that I didn't see. So that's what I do. I normally pin both ends, then the middle, then half of each of those, and on something this size, half of each of those. So I can ease things in if I need to. In this particular case, I did my measuring. I know what I need, and I did get I did get these cut to size. And so when I'm all done, and I get them through, I'll be good. I also mentioned last time that I used an 11-foot piece of fabric, which was more than I needed to do this quilt. And I cut the whole thing up. So I did get an email, and I forgot about this. So I will email the person that sent it back to me and tell them that I talked about it here, asking me how much material did I have left over that I cut down, because I wanted my strips long enough that my sashings could all go on without any seams in the middles. I didn't have to do any of my 45 degrees or anything. I could just sew like the wind. So what I have left is I have 6 of these, which are 11 feet long and 2.5 inches wide. And those are the full length of fabric that I had at the time. And then I have some smaller strips that came off of the roll because the roll was longer than I needed to make my sashing in 2.5. I wound up with extra fabric at the end. It was more than 12.5, so it's going to go into my strip drawers. And then with my 6.5, I have 3 of those that I cut. 1, 2, and 3. And so I'm going to have plenty of this. Now I'm going to refold it. But this was rolled up. I didn't have any paper towel rolls. I would normally use the paper towel rolls for these. But these are going to be folded and put in my 6.5-inch drawer. And so it'll be ready, because I really did like this. I know you probably can't see it. It has these little gold, oh maybe you can. It has these little gold dots. So it reads as red from back here, but when you get closer you get a little bit of a shimmer because it's a metallic gold, not just the color gold. And I think that's a little fun thing to add into a charity quilt. You know, give them a little bit of bling. So I have tons left over, which is great. I could have just saved and not cut this all up. I could have done my with the fabric. I would have needed less material. But knowing me, the way some of you know me, this is not going to go to waste. This is going to get put into quilts, and now it's already pre-cut and ready to rock and roll when I'm ready to rock and roll. So these are probably going to go into StashBlaster quilts, but they're going these 6.5s. But I'll need fewer of them because they're wider, so I'll be able to rock out the quilts even faster. And that's particularly important when you're trying to get out a large number of quilts for like a disaster. So if I was doing something right now, let's say for Hurricane Ida, I would use a wider strip. I would still use the 2.5 black strips that I already cut and rolled, you know, a year ago, because it was 15 yards, and I did a couple of bolts at 2.5 inches wide, tore them, rolled them, done, washed, dried, everything. So they're ready to roll whenever I am. So I'll be able to get out more quilts in even less time. So that's the idea, is that if I'm doing disaster sewing, you know, maybe I want to only take a couple of weeks and knock out 100 quilts. And you can do that if you're prepped in advance, everything's ready to go, and you have a system, which is the whole thing behind StashBlaster 1, is to be able to knock a lot of these out very, very quickly. So anyway, so that's it. Again, for those of you who are new, please forgive me for the foibles that have been going on and the misspeakings today. I'm not usually that bad. But if you go onto StashBlasterQuilts.com, StashBlaster 1 pattern is on the website. It is free. Okay, you can download it for free. You can share it to make charity quilts. I ask that it be charity based, or if you're doing it as a fundraiser for your guild, I consider that a charity as well. You are more than welcome to use it for any charity based thing you want to do. I would prefer that you not just make them and sell them for personal income, but if it's for a charity event, if it's for disaster relief, if it's for a fundraiser or anything like that, that's cool. You're welcome to use it. I am going to be coming up with some alternative versions, which is what the blue and white one here is. And so that'll be yet another pattern that'll be out there. But any pattern I have that has StashBlaster in the name, and there are 4 of them, I don't have the patterns all done, but there are 4 that are already sewn, those you are free to use. Okay, so I'm stating it in public. You now have it. Anywho, I just keep forgetting that sometimes there's going to be somebody who hasn't seen that part before. And so I want to make sure that you know that I'm happy to have you do that. And the thing about this quilt is that if you're doing it as a guild event, let's say you want to do a charity sit and sew, this is an incredibly forgiving design, and it doesn't matter if you have perfect cutting, it doesn't matter if you have perfect piecing, nothing. It's gonna work, and that's the nice thing about it. I teach this for all of my very beginning students. So when I've had like teenagers that I'm teaching and it's their first time ever even threading a machine, they make this StashBlaster 1 quilt and they come out of it and they have quilts to give their friends, because we make 4 at a time, and things that they can do for charity. So it's a great Girl Scout type of project, or for your guild. And you don't have to worry about perfection. I mean, one of the nice things is I just sewed this on here, this side border, and if you notice, there are no matching seams the way I sewed it on. None of the seams in this entire quilt have to match anywhere else. So it's very, very forgiving. Now, if you want more fiddly quilts, then those are the ones that you're going to have that are on my on the StashBlaster site as well, but they're not labeled StashBlaster quilts. They're just regular quilts. Oh, so I mentioned Tiny Orchard Quilts. Another one that I watch a lot is Karen Brown and Just Get It Done Quilts. She has a wonderful series on color theory. So if you're nervous about how to pick your fabric colors, that is a wonderful series to watch. And she also has Karen's Quilt Circle, where she interviews some really nifty people. So that's how I got clued into Gnome Angel, was on her interviews. And while I'm not participating in the 100 Blocks in 100 Days event that she's got going, just because I don't have 100 minutes, much less 100 days right now, she was also a really neat person, and I'm looking forward to spending more time on her site. So right now, those are the two that I'm watching the most. But at this point, I think I've seen everything Karen has put out. So I'm mostly just waiting for the alerts that she has a new video. And then when I see that she has one, I put it on when I'm, doing stuff in my job, where I'm at my desk, sorting emails or uploading photos or something like that. I do a lot of photo work, because I have a lot of my clients who can't get into the homes. They're either, it's an estate and this person doesn't even live in the area, or they're in a community and so they can't get into their home. So I take a lot of photos that I send to clients so that they can make decisions on what they want to keep, what they want to let go of. They can see what progress we made, because that gives them a lot of confidence that I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing and I'm keeping their desires in mind. And it gives them that sense of control where some stranger isn't just coming in and riffling through their underwear and deciding which underwear to keep, or, what clothes that they have to wear for the rest of their lives, or what to do with grandma's china. They get to make a lot of those decisions themselves, if not all of them. And it isn't just the kids making the decisions. So one of the things for my seniors that's a real big problem is a lot of times they feel that they have lost control over their lives, their possessions, their money, everything else. And that's kind of dehumanizing. It makes you feel really small. And so the more choices I can give them and the more input I can give them, the better it is for them and the happier they are with the entire process. Because if they've had a fall and they're never going to be able to go home again because, they physically can't handle the stairs or the amount of clutter that they have or the amount of furniture that they have, they can't negotiate around it, whatever it is, having all their stuff just disappear and them having no say in it is traumatizing. And so we definitely don't want that to happen. So that's why I do so much work uploading photos and sending it to people. And I have a client right now who doesn't access her own email, so her daughter goes over and they go through the photos together. And they talk about, okay, what is it that we need to keep and how do we want to keep it? And are we keeping it, here in your, does this come to you here? Like photos and things like that? Or does it go over to my home? How do we want to do this? And, at the very beginning, I even take pictures of the stuff I'm trashing. Like torn brown paper bags and wadded up Kleenex and things like that. I do tell them that if it's a wadded up Kleenex, I did make sure there was nothing in it, which kind of makes them go, ew. But there's some people who wrap things in Kleenex. So if there's any sort of back pressure when you squeeze it, wearing gloves, there's, I will take a look. I know my job is really weird. But once they get used to that and we all agree that Maria understands what is trash, then unless it's something new, then we agree that yes, Maria can throw out all of the brown paper bags that are torn, any bag that's torn, or you can donate all the Christmas wrapping papers or whatever. And they can start making bigger decisions on bigger categories as we go, because they believe that I'm going to do what I say I'm going to do, and that they're going to be able to control their stuff. And they're often much happier, even if they have to stay in the community, because they have those things that are important to them with them. Or it's at the daughter's, or it's, I hate to put them in storage, or it's in a storage unit, or whatever it is that they've decided for where their items are going to go. They've gone the appropriate places. I often tell people when I speak out in public on downsizing and decluttering that the more of your stuff that you can declutter, the more your children will appreciate it when you pass and they have to deal with it all. Because that happens a lot. Somebody will pass away and the kids have mountains of things and they don't know what's important. They don't know who the people are in the photographs, and they don't care often. So mom is now in a skilled nursing, so they go into the house, they rent a dumpster, they throw everything out, and they decide these are the clothes we're taking for mom to wear. And she may hate those clothes, they may not fit her, and she doesn't have a choice because everything else is gone. So that's just one of those things where I always recommend that people start early for that purpose. And we just kind of see how it goes from there. But anyway, so I tend to watch, I more listen to YouTube than watch. But if they say something interesting, I will, pop up and watch what they're doing, and then or rewind it a little bit and then go back. But I do like having that ability. I also listen to a lot of books on tape, because that's less distracting than having the TV show commercial going on the whole time, where the volumes are all changing and then somebody says something and you missed it. And so for me, it's better that it's at a standard volume and I can control it and I can pause it if somebody has a question for me, because Tim is often popping into my office with questions. Because I'll have been talking to the client when I'm working with them, and then I need something done, and so we have to talk about how that happens. And so I can pause something on YouTube and go back 30 seconds and then come back and watch the rest of it later. So it is only a couple minutes to 8. I have finished the last seam. I'm going to pop one more leader and ender through, and then this quilt top is going to be done. And so when we come back, this is the 3rd Wednesday, so the 1st Wednesday of October, because when I finally got it straight before, 1st and 3rd Wednesday of the month, when we come back, I will have the finished quilt top ready to go and show you. And then I don't know if I'll have it sandwiched or not at that point. Like I said, it's been really long days. I'm hoping to. And if worse comes to worse, we'll move the design walls and we'll pick some fabric together. Okay? So I have 7:58. I'm going to call it good because I am now done for the day on the sewing. I'm not exactly sure what happened at the end there. Something went weird. I now got to gather in my leader and ender. So I'm going to need to rethread the machine to find out what the problem is. And so I will do that. But in the meantime, have a wonderful couple of weeks, everybody. And if you are watching this during the 2 to 3 weeks in between, I'm fairly sure this is going to be another one that's up a little bit longer. But please like, please subscribe, hit the bell, all that kind of stuff if you've enjoyed today. And we will be ready to move forward with the quilt next time. Okay? Thank you. Bye-bye. And let's go sew. Bye-bye. I don't know why that isn't working. Okay, so here you are watching me with tech. Sorry. Take care, everybody.